If you were to guess the top 10 most played tribes as per EDHREC, do you think that you could get it? I guess let's see. So, as per EDHREC, the top 10 most played tribes are dragons, elves, zombies, vampires, dinosaurs, Eldrazi, humans, goblins, angels, and pirates, with merfolk being pretty close behind. Now, I am going to caveat that I think that those counts are pretty low. Obviously, the counts would be much higher because not everyone actually tags their decks. For example, only 11,491 out of 34,000 Krenko Mob Boss decks are actually tagged as Goblin decks. But I mean, let's be honest, if you're playing Krenko, then you're playing a Goblin deck. So nonetheless, I do think that those 10 are pretty fair representations. In this video, we'll be going over tribal support cards that do not actually belong to the tribe. So for example, Herald of War is an angel that gives cost reduction to humans. And Gisa the Hellraiser is a human warlock that boosts skeletons and zombies despite not being a skeleton or zombie herself. So this video is thanks to a request from one of my tier 3 patrons, OBRad, who is able to request a video topic each month as per their tier 3 patron. So thanks so much for the idea, OBRad. I would have never have thought of this idea on my own, but I had a ton of fun researching this. So I'm actually going to do things a little bit differently and break this down into 2 sections today. So the first is going to be the honorable mentions as normal, but I'm going to rapid fire through them. And this is going to be made up of cards that directly mention a tribe on their card, despite not belonging to that tribe. So any cards that specifically mention dinosaurs, birds, humans, dragons, or any specific tribe is going to be in this honorable mentions list. And the second part is going to be cards that don't actually say a creature type on the card itself, but using common traits of that group, we can deduce that it would be a good support card. So for example, Abstruse Archaic is an avatar that doesn't specifically mention Eldrazi anywhere on the card, but most Eldrazi are colorless creatures, so Abstruse Archaic indirectly supports Eldrazi in a powerful way. But this example is pretty obvious because it was literally printed in an Eldrazi precon. But anyways, jumping into the direct support, we have Forerunner of the Empire, which is in 21,000 decks. And this is a human soldier that can tutor for a dinosaur and put it on the top of your library. And whenever a dinosaur enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each creature, including the creature that just entered. And this can be pretty helpful because there's a lot of dinosaurs that have the Enrage ability. So this alone can trigger a lot of Enrage abilities, which is awesome. Next up is Kinjali's Collar, which is also dinosaur support. This is a 1-drop. It's a human cleric that mentions reducing the cost of dinosaur spells by 1. Next up, we have Hermes Overseer of Elpis, which is in 19,700 decks. And this is a Elder Wizard that has bird support. So whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you create a 1/1 blue bird with Flying and Vigilance. And whenever you attack with 1 or more birds, you scry 2. So pretty cool if you do decide to slot that into any bird decks. Next up is Angel of Glory's Ride, which is in 17,000 decks. This is an angel that when it enters, it exiles all zombies, then returns all human creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is a pretty cool card in the late game that can just reanimate your entire deck pretty much if you are in a dedicated human deck. Next up is Dragonologist. This is a recent card that's a human wizard that when it enters can look at the top 6 cards of your library, then you can reveal an instant sorcery or dragon and put it into your hand. But the other important part is that untapped dragons you control have hexproof. So despite not being a dragon itself, Dragonologist does support dragons. Up next we have Mogcatcher, which is in 10,600 decks. In Mogcatcher, you can pay 3 and tap it to search your library for a goblin card and put that into play. So that's pretty cool that it literally tutors for it and puts it right onto the battlefield. I'm surprised it doesn't see much more play. It is a mercenary, but yeah, maybe the activation is kind of slow for goblin decks, so that would make sense. Next up is another goblin support card. That's Gorebag of Minas Morgul. And this, whenever a goblin or orc deals damage, you can sacrifice it, and then you can draw a card or create a treasure deck. I think the problem is you have to be playing a deck that plays goblins, but also black. But if you are doing that, then this can be a pretty awesome ability, either ramping or drawing, two of some of the most important things that you can do in a deck. Next up is Sea Hunter, which is in 8,130 decks. This pretty much does the exact same thing as Mogcatcher, but it searches for a merfolk instead of a goblin and puts that right into play. Next up, we have Cavalry Pegasus. This one supports humans, and when it attacks, each attacking human gains flying. So that could be pretty good, especially as just a 2-drop. You can get this down pretty early and add some evasion to your entire deck. Next up, we have Estinian Varlino, who is in 4,950 decks. This second ability is the main one. It says at the beginning of your second main phase, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of your opponents who were dealt damage, either by Estinian or a dragon this turn. So pretty cool. It's in off colors, so you're likely playing a 5-color dragon deck. And if you do, then you could be drawing 3 cards each turn as a result of this ability. So that's pretty nice. Next up, we have Dearly Departed, which is in 3,640 decks. So this is a spirit that, as long as it's in your graveyard, then each human you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. I always like these ones where they're turned on when they are in the graveyard, because they're much more likely to add that value throughout the course of the game. And because a lot of people just don't eat their veggies and play enough graveyard hate. Next up is one that I also was surprised to see sees so little play. It's Skyshroud Poacher, who is in 3,510 decks. This was a cycle apparently, which searches for an elf for 3 in a tap and puts it right into play. I didn't look for the other ones, but so far we have 3 of the 5 colors of someone who is not a part of the tribe that searches and puts it right into the battlefield. Next up, we have Master Trinketeer, which is in 2,750 decks. So this is an anthem for servos and thopters if you are playing a deck that plays those types of creatures. Next up, we have Priest of the Awakening Sun. This is a 1-drop human cleric that can support dinosaur decks. As a 1-drop, we're not expecting too much, but late in the game, you can sacrifice it to search your library for a dinosaur card and put it into your hand. So it's a pretty nice tutor. Next up, we have one that I really like, and I actually bought after I saw this because I'm like, yeah, I want to build something around that, and it's Soraya the Falconer. This card is a human, and it's only played in 891 decks, and it helms 860 more decks. This says all falcons get +1/+1, and you can pay 2 to say target falcon gains banding until end of turn. So this obviously is a very old card, so the updated text says all birds you control get +1/+1, and target bird gains banding. So you'll have to explain to people how banding actually works, but in dedicated bird decks, this could go crazy. I love that. Next up, we have Cabal Slaver, who is in 561 decks. It says whenever a goblin deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card from his or her hand. Dang, yeah, it's same issue as before. You have to be playing a goblin deck that actually has black in it instead of mono red. But if you do, it's the fact that it's whenever a goblin, not one or more, that can pretty much wipe out your entire opponent's hands when you attack with a wide board of goblins. If there's anything that you do see in this video that you'd like to pick up, you can support the channel directly by using my TCG player affiliate link below. All of that is always much appreciated. So now let's jump into the actual indirect support pieces that we're talking about today. First up, we have Jackdaw Savior, which is in 23,900 decks. So this is a 3-mana bird cleric that costs 3/1. It has flying, and it says, whenever Jackdaw Savior or another creature you control with flying dies, return another target creature card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this card obviously supports bird decks because this itself is a bird, but it is much better than just bird support decks. Because the ability applies to any creature that dies with flying. That means that this card is an excellent support piece in angel decks, dragon decks, and sphinx decks, but this doesn't see play in any of those tribes that I just mentioned. Not a single dragon deck cracks the top 25 commanders playing this, meaning if there is a dragon commander playing this, there's not a single one that has over 170 decks using it, because that's where the top commander cutoff is. I think it's likely because this itself is not a dragon, so it doesn't come to mind, or people just see, bird as a creature type and immediately funnel it as a bird deck support only. But it is much better than that, and the fact that the reanimation is directly to the battlefield and not returning it to your hand is insane value for a 3-drop. And the last thing that I'll say about this is that the only limitation is the mana value. So this doesn't limit it to just once each turn or reanimating with finality counters. I just think that this card is insane. Next up, we have Jubilant Skybonder, who is in 20,200 decks. So this is a 3-mana human wizard that has flying, and it says creatures you control with flying have spells your opponents cast that target this creature cost 2 more to cast. Okay, I'm making the exact same argument as Jackdaw Savior. This is not played in any dragon decks because this itself is not a dragon. But yet, other staples that aren't dragons still see play in decks despite not being dragons. Like Dragon Speaker Shaman is not a dragon itself, but it's played in like almost 100,000 decks. So, of course, cost reduction is good. Yeah, no one will argue that. But also giving Ward 2 to all of your creatures or reanimating them directly to the battlefield with Jackdaw Savior is also very good. So I say this to make the argument that I don't think that this isn't being played, not necessarily because it is not a dragon, because I just said non-dragons are still being played in a lot of dragon decks. I think this goes back to EDH rectification. A lot of people just don't know that this exists, or when they look at other people's bird lists, they always see this pop up in bird deck lists. But no one is playing this in dragon decks, so it just doesn't cross anyone's mind. Whereas if this was being recommended by EDH Rec as one of the top synergistic cards, I think we'd likely see this a lot more often in said dragon or angel or sphinx decks. And so I think it is just a crutch that a lot of people these days do have on relying a lot on online deck lists, as opposed to just seeing, most dragons have flying. And so this also can be a very good protection piece in your dragon decks. Let me know what you think, but I'd love to hear what your take is on that approach. Next up, we have Curator Beastie, which sees play in 15,700 decks. So this is a 6-mana beast. It's 6/6, it has reach, and colorless creatures you control enter with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on them. And whenever Curator Beastie enters or attacks, Manifest Dread. So the fact that this mentions Manifest Dread, this immediately pigeonholes this card to mostly Manifest and face down decks. But this can also go hard in Eldrazi decks for the same reason of being colorless creatures. While maybe the big guys, it might only be a marginal difference, like a 7/7 versus a 9/9 is still a big creature. But if the deck is running a lot of Eldrazi spawn tokens, that can be a huge difference in turning a 0/1 do nothing into a 2/3 blocker that can add mana after blocking or attacking. And where I think this can also make a big difference is in Myr or Thopter decks by turning 1/1 flyers into 3/3 flyers. That is a huge difference. I was also surprised to see how many golem decks there are as well. So that's another colorless creature type that could benefit from a card like this. Next up, we have Vannifar Evolved Enigma, who is in 11,700 decks. So this is a 4-mana elf ooze wizard that's 3/4, and it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one. Cloak a card from your hand, which means put it onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature with Ward 2, and then you can turn it face up anytime for its mana cost if it is a creature card. Or the other option is you can put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature that you control. So this one, same argument for Eldrazi, Golems, Myrs, Thopters, and all of those other colorless creatures. I won't go into that too much because, putting a +1/+1 counter on each of those each turn is pretty cool. But where I think that this can be a pretty unique and cool support card is in rogue, assassin, or ninja decks. So the reason why I think this card in those decks in particular could be pretty nice is because rogues, assassins, and ninjas are all known for having triggered abilities for dealing combat damage to a player. So that's why so many ninjas have ninjutsu, is because they can sneak in after blockers have been declared, then they get value by dealing damage directly to the player. Vannifar kind of provides a different approach and a different level of evasion that can accomplish the exact same task. So after blockers have been declared, you have your face down creature and then you just flip it up at instant speed, and now your ninja or your rogue goes unblocked. You can turn it face up and then get the damage trigger. So yeah, I think that this is a pretty cool card for disguising your ninjas or other cards without anyone knowing what card is actually going to be triggered when they deal damage and flip it up. If you're enjoying this video, you can check out our Patreon where we talk about fun card interactions. We talk about deck building competition submissions all the time. And for tier 3 patrons, you can request video topics exactly like this one that we're covering now on a monthly basis. Link is in the description below if you do want to check it out. Next up, we have Leafkin Avenger, who is a 4 mana. It costs 2 generic and 1 red and 1 green for an elemental druid that is a 4/3, and it says tap. Add green for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Then you could pay 7 and a red, and Leafkin Avenger deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker. So this one obviously fits into Kindred decks that tend to have a lot of power. So ones that come to mind with these colors are dinosaurs, of course, as well as beast decks. So things like Slinza the Spiked Stampede, dragons as well, since most of the top commanders have these colors. Maybe raccoons if you're playing Bellow Bard of the Brambles and want to animate your enchantments. And also this works with elemental decks, so something like an Omnath Locus of Rage, where you're creating 5/5 elementals. This card mostly sees play in activated ability decks because of that 8 mana activation, but I honestly didn't even think of that when I was reading this. I just saw the potential for how much mana this can generate in the right decks. And the nice thing is, this itself does have 4 power, so worst case scenario, that is at least 1 mana. But I think most of the times you'll likely be able to create 3, 4, or 5 mana in something like a dinosaur deck. Next up, we have Glitch Interpreter, who is in 8,800 decks. So this one is 3 mana, it costs 2 generic and 1 blue for a human wizard that's a 2/3. It says, when Glitch Interpreter enters, if you control no face down permanents, return Glitch Interpreter to its owner's hand and manifest dread. Whenever one or more colorless creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So I'm not going to go into the whole colorless groups again, but I'm mentioning this because the payoff this time is another great payoff in my opinion. Now, instead of getting +1 counters, you can draw cards for dealing damage with your big Eldrazi or other colorless creatures. But I will say, unlike Curator Beastie, this one is a little harder to actually get down if you're not in a dedicated non-face down deck, because the ability returns it to your hand. But even then, Manifesting Dread is fun in the first place and can be a good stealth option for your decks until you are actually able to get this down and it sticks, and then you start drawing a lot of cards by dealing a lot of damage with your colorless guys. Next up, we have Archon of Redemption, which is played in 4,270 decks. This is a 5 mana Archon that's a 3/4 and has flying, and it says, whenever Archon of Redemption or another creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain life equal to that creature's power. So first of all, I remember seeing this in stores when I first started playing Magic the Gathering. I don't know what deck or what product it was part of, but I specifically remember seeing this card in a Christmas pop-up shop, and it was the face card for the white deck, and the other face card was for a green deck, and it was Overwhelming Stampede. That was when World Wake was out. And so, yeah, this card, just seeing it brings back so many memories. It was actually the first deck that I ever played because my cousin bought it for me, and that's what got me into Magic in the first place. But if anyone does know what I'm referring to, I'd love your help. Like if you have any idea what product I'm referring to. But I'm also curious, what was the first product that you specifically ever remember once you started playing Magic the Gathering? But anyways, this card can be a huge support in any angels or spirits or sphinxes or dragon decks or anything that flies that also uses white. Sure, I get it. Dragon decks don't typically try to gain a ton of life, but it sure can't hurt. Having this on the battlefield in an Dragon deck and a Miriam Sentinel Worm down, you gain like 10 to 15 life every time you cast one of your dragons or one enters the battlefield. And I know maybe it's not for dragons and it isn't a dragon, but in your Dragon deck, you don't even need to cast it. It can be one of the permanents that you put onto the battlefield. And if that's not your jam for dragons, maybe you don't care about it. At least angels are in the business for gaining life. It's kind of like a righteous Valkyrie, but it counts power instead of toughness, and it doesn't have the anthem effect, but it is an excellent way to trigger other life gain effects that are very abundant in white angel decks. So we have 2 more, and just a quick reminder for anyone who is new here, if you enjoy hearing my random way of thinking, you can sign up for the Unpopular MTG report to get a deep dive into an unpopular card or mechanic every week. The link is down below and it's completely free. So next up we have Sigil Captain, which is in 2,910 decks. This is a 4-mana Rhino Soldier that is a 3/3, and it says, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature is 1/1, put 2+1/+1 counters on it. So the first thing that did come to mind initially was goblins, because most goblins are 1/1, but I don't know if people are actually playing any Naya goblin decks. If so, your goblins can now be 3/3. But aside from goblins, there's a lot more practical tokens that could actually trigger this out of these colors. So there's things like human tokens, soldiers, rabbits. There's sapperlings, also servos typically are 1/1. We got thopters, there's citizens, elves typically are 1/1s as well, fairies, birds, spirits, you get those vampire tokens with lifelink, and now thanks to Avatar as well, ally tokens also tend to be 1/1s, so all of those can come in and are now 3/3 with this card on the battlefield. The trick is to be playing the right colors like I said, but I do think spirits, sapperlings, soldiers, and humans can all, have no trouble fitting this into a deck with Selesnya colors. And our last card today is Ursat's Gnomes. This is in 295 decks, so like literally no one is playing this. This is a 3-mana artifact creature that's a 1/1, and it says target spell is colorless. Play this ability as an interrupt, or you can tap it and say target permanent is colorless until end of turn. So when I saw this, the main thing that came to mind is most Eldrazi decks these days are playing something like Echoes of Eternity, which doubles triggered abilities of a colorless spell or a colorless permanent. So if you are in an Eldrazi deck, like a 5-color Ululek deck maybe, that is playing Echoes of Eternity, you could have Ursat's Gnome on the battlefield and then cast something like an Etali Primal Conqueror, and while it's on the stack, you tap this to turn Etali into a colorless spell, and that way when it actually hits the battlefield, you would double up the triggered ability with having Echoes of Eternity on the battlefield to then get 2 Etali Primal Conqueror triggers. Outside of Eldrazi, this is just a free crime committer for any decks that care about committing crimes, or this is also a protection for the very few Dromar decks that are out there. You can turn your commander into a colorless creature and then return all of the other, creatures that are the colors that typically would return your commander to hand. So it's kind of a random card. Only 295 are playing it, but I do think that this could see play in some Eldrazi effects that care about colorless creatures or spells. Anyway, that's everything that I have for today. Let me know what you think. And also, if you do agree or disagree with some of my approaches or ideas on cards that can either directly or indirectly support specific tribes. Like I said, thanks so much, OBRad, for this video idea. I would have never have thought of something like this. I thought it was super fun to think about. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. We'll see you next time.